Sometimes it can be helpful to understand what's going on in our relationships by using a model or image to better understand our interactions with our partner, if it's an intimate relationship or if it's at work with my coworkers. And there's this fancy word, transactional analysis. And if we go past the fanciness of the word, what it wants to share with us is that there are three ego states. There's a parent ego state, there's an adult ego state, and there's a child ego state. And the parent ego state, that is things that we learn from our parents about how they behaved or how we interpreted how they acted and behaved. This becomes our parent ego state or part of us. And there are two kinds of parent ego state. There's the nurturing and there's the criticizing parent ego state. And it can be that voice in your head that wants to take care of others as a parent. When you see people around, you feel a strong responsibility that goes beyond being two adults meeting. You feel like you want to nurture or criticize. You look down on them and you judge them, and that's your parent ego state. The adult ego state, that is the second ego state, and that is all about here and now. Experiences in the now. That is the adult ego state's focus. The child ego state, that is comes more from our childhood, just like the parent ego state has more of a history to it. The child ego state is what we think, it's pretty much our childhood that we bring with us. And in the child ego state has two different kinds as well, just like the parent ego state. There's the free child, which is spontaneous, outliving, reactive, and there's the adapted child that, as the word says, adapts to its parents, controlled, learns to I do this to survive or to get love or attention or whatever, the adapted child. Then between these ego states, if we have two individuals, let's say individual A is waiting for B at a meeting point in town because they've decided, they set a time to go to a movie together. In this interaction between A and B, there will be, depending on these, because they each have these three ego states at play, there will be three different kinds of interactions. The one, we call them transactions because we say transactional analysis, but the interaction or transaction can either be complementary. Complementary means that person B comes 10 minutes late. Person A has been standing there worried, concerned, what's been going on? And so person B comes late and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I got so into one thing I was doing at the work, I totally forgot about time. I'm so sorry. I'm sure you must have been both worried and concerned and maybe upset about it. I'm sorry." And person A responding to this adult, because this would be the adult ego speaking that way, and person A who's been waiting responds from their adult ego and says, "Yes, that's right, I was both concerned and worried, but I'm happy that you're here now, let's go watch the movie together." And they're both fine about it. They spoke as two adults. The adult egos had an interaction or a transaction, and we call it complementary. Then there can be the crossed transaction. Again, the same scenario, the two friends going to the movie, person B 10 minutes late, and person B comes and says again from their adult ego, "Oh, I'm sorry I'm late, I got caught up at work, I got into this thing and I totally lost track of time, I'm so sorry, I'm sure you stood here both and were worried and concerned, I'm sorry I'm late." And person A says one thing but has a different experience or thought inside. This is where it gets crossed. He or she might say again the same thing, meaning you should have thought of that. They might say, "It's okay, let's go," but inside they're thinking like, "Oh, you could have just picked up the phone and called me, couldn't you?" Like inside it's the parent ego who's talking. Either they say this verbally, either they say it out and say it straight to the person, or they're just thinking it. Like you could have just picked up. They're speaking to the child ego of person B, saying, "You could have at least picked up the phone and told me you were late, couldn't you? I was standing here waiting." And then we have the third kind of transaction or interaction, which is called covert. And this is, again, this gets when both parties are thinking something else than what they're saying. And in this case, same thing, B comes late to A and they say the same things as they did in the first example. I'm sorry, I'm late and so forth, it's okay, let's go. But person A is thinking, oh, you don't love me anymore, you don't like me anymore, you don't want to be with me, that's why you're late, it's because of me. So they're acting like the child ego, they're coming from the child ego, that's their experience inside, while person B might be in their criticizing parent ego and thinking, well, if you were so concerned about standing here, you could have called me, you could have let me know, you could have reminded me, whatever. So they're thinking coming from their parent, criticizing parent ego. And again, what is the point here? The point is, of course, have as many complementary transaction interactions as you can. Speak as two adults together. Be aware of when your parent ego comes into play and when your child ego lets loose or gets adapted. Because these two, they are for passion. I don't know what the metaphor would be, but they're no good for the passion and the free flow of love in a relationship. Because we just don't get that turned on by a criticizing parent, or at least not most of us. Most of it doesn't. And so finding that complementary transaction when we meet as two adults, and be aware of those voices, if you want to call them that, in this model, the parent ego and the child ego. And I'm sure that will help you create more openness, more maturity, and more love together with your partner and in your other relationships around you.